Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gird Up Podcast. My name is Charlie Ungemach. Very, very excited to have you here today. We have a guest, and we'll share his story in just a moment. Before we do that, I'd like to invite you to help support the work we do here at Gird Up by buying us a cup of coffee. We call it a cup of coffee donation because for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help support the ministry we're doing here at Gird Up as we flood the internet with confessional content and help prepare the people of God for whatever lies ahead. If you'd like to support or help fund the conversations we're having here at Gird Up, go to www.girdupministries.com, select Buy Us a Cup of Coffee in the main menu, and make your donation there. That money gets spent on just the things that make the podcast run. So whether it's equipment and things, although we're pretty good on equipment right now, whether it's all the subscriptions and things that make the podcast go out to the world. For example, this week we had to pay the annual fee to have a website, things like that. So you guys help me put all that stuff together. It's not something I could really afford to do on my own, so I appreciate the help and appreciate that you guys value this enough to help support the work that we do. So God bless you. Thank you for doing that. If you are interested in helping support the work we do here having these conversations, please consider buying us a cup of coffee or two. God bless you all. Our guest today is Jacob Klug. We're recording this one in the morning, so pardon our morning voices here. Jacob, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It was an excellent Easter out at Mountain View Lutheran Church, and good Mother's Day worship yesterday. Decided to leave the lectionary, not for the gospel, we still did Good Shepherd Sunday, but I preached on Hagar and Ishmael in Genesis 16, talked about some of the isolation that happens in family life. That was a riot. Going out to the mountains later today, so we're good. We're good, Charles.
Good day to be in Calgary.
Absolutely. Snow's gone. It's pretty warm.
How warm is pretty warm in May in Calgary?
I don't know if I could say yet. This May, like if it's over 55, I'm happy. We've had a lot of like days that warm up to 60, 65 by the end. The sun's out so late already. It doesn't get dark till 9 or 9:30, and so it gets warm till 6, 7 p.m. You know, you just kind of shift your day back and enjoy what you get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Is Mother's Day the same date in Canada as it is in the U.S.? Is it an official Mother's Day, or is it just kind of something that gets observed?
Well, I called my mom and said Happy Mother's Day, and she didn't say anything different. She didn't say it's not Mother's Day yet, you idiot. So it must be the same in the States then, right? It was Mother's Day
Oh,
yesterday?
yesterday was Mother's Day,
Okay.
yeah. The day that we're recording it is the day after Mother's Day, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it must be the same. I
All
don't know
right.
if it's a real holiday here or like what that would mean. Like Good Friday is a stat holiday. Like people get off of work for it. For example,
Interesting.
it was a
Yeah.
Sunday Mother's Day, so people kind of don't work already. I don't know. I don't know my official holiday stuff in Canada yet. We'll get there soon.
Love it. All right, you emailed me a couple of weeks ago, and you said you had an episode idea, and I'm all in for it. You want to explain what you wanted to talk about on the show?
Yeah. So a few months ago now, I did a funeral for a man at church, and he was a Lutheran school teacher up in Whitehorse in the Yukon, and then in several other places throughout the world, and in Edmonton, and he did some poetry on the side, and he did a commentary on a very famous poem by Kipling called "If" that maybe a good number of the listeners had heard before. I know you'd heard before, and it's a commentary from
Got it hanging on my wall.
do you really?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. It's a commentary from a Christian Lutheran perspective, if you will. And we read it, or his son read it at the funeral, along, or not at the funeral, but at the reception after the funeral, along with some other poetry that Dad had written, and I thought that was enjoyable, and it like this guy was a real man. He knew how to fix things. He knew how to teach and think and write. He was an excellent father. He was gracious in his suffering in his last days. He was holding on to his Savior, and I thought, this is something worth talking about as we think about manhood here. And his commentary on If by Kipling I thought was interesting and up your alley, and so I sent it over your way, and then it got us talking and thinking about poetry and a Wells poet or two, and maybe even the Psalms, and so here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been a while. I'm not sure that I ever have looked at, I've got If by Kipling memorized, and I will recite it to myself when I need to hear it. But I also am not entirely sure that I've ever looked at it as a whole critically. We've certainly talked about lines from the poem, and I have applied certain lines or concepts to my own life when appropriate, but I am not sure. I don't have a memory of ever walking through the poem verse by verse critically. So thank you for the opportunity to do that.
So you've
And then
done that now.
I have done that now, just to prepare for this. And then Pullman's commentary on it also I've enjoyed very much. And there's a lot of wisdom in those couple of verses about it. So I think what we should maybe just do first is walk through Kipling's poem and talk about the standard that he's setting for manhood. He is the poet laureate of the 19th century man. So if
Yeah.
anybody's not familiar with Rudyard Kipling in his life, he's worth looking up. But he was born in England, he was born in India, spent most of his life in India after going to school in England and being abused by a school teacher and things like that. Was not a large man. He was a fairly small, sickly man with thick glasses and all that. Not what you'd expect. Not the broad-chested, He-Man of the Royal Army, for sure. And yet still ended up being the poet laureate of the 19th century man. And so listening to a man like that talk about the virtues of masculinity and manhood, what we for some reason today are calling traditional manhood, as if it isn't just manhood, inside or outside the church.
Well, that's a good observation.
It just
I hadn't thought of that.
simply is. It just simply is how men are made. When we look at nature, we don't parse the genders in nature the way that we do in mankind in humankind for some reason. When you look at lions on the prairie, we're not critical of the fact that the male lions lounge around all day while the female lions do all the work, and then all of a sudden the male lion jumps up and goes and kills an antelope, and then the female lions eat the antelope, and he provides for. We don't criticize those things in nature.
Nor do we
and then
say
we're supposed to.
Nor do we say that's a traditional lion. It's just a lion.
Right, yeah. These are traditional lion roles, lion gender roles. Yeah. And then at the same time, we're supposed to think of ourselves as nothing more than naked apes, right? We're supposed to be part of the animal kingdom, and yet how dare we apply the same standard to ourselves as we do to the animal kingdom? It's a bizarre world that we live in.
It kind of shows that, like, we've lost the image of God, and so when people are trying to find it again, they have to root it in something because they don't know that it is just who we're supposed to be, because they don't know that Christ has redeemed and restored us and given back the image of God partially now, forever, in eternity. So they have to decide that it was the Judeo-Christian ethic of the West, or whatever it is, whatever subset of biological instincts that makes it traditional manner. Who knows what someone might say, but that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's one of those things that just makes me scratch my head. Now, it's a little easier when you're a guy who is shaped like me, right? But 6'3", 200-something pounds with a beard, and genuinely enjoys most of the traditionally masculine things. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but also at the same time, there's a whole lot of people that would be wired like me and looked like me and act like me, for better or for worse.
Yeah,
who are trying desperately to be something else.
But not everyone gets to be clay modeled and fashioned after the frontiersman Yukon Cornelius from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right? Like
God, prospector of the North.
Because God gave you that gift, and don't let anyone take it away from you.
Amen. Amen. All right, If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or, being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve their turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, the earth is yours and everything that's in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son.
It's excellent. Every time I hear it, every time I read it, it grabs me. At least some of it does. Makes me think of it's like a British Marcus Aurelius willing himself into being the best thing he can be, talking himself out of bed, stuff like that.
It's interesting also, having never been a member of the British Armed Forces, that he also wrote a myriad of poems and battle songs and things like that, specifically for and about the India regiments, like the British India regiments. It's also a fascinating thing to me that he was drawn to it like that even though he couldn't serve himself.
Yeah, that's like, it seems like something you wouldn't write about, right? Like, if you're in the Marines, then you can be with your Marine buddies and tell stories and sing songs and write jokes about the Marines and write a memoir book that sells, really well because you're a Navy SEAL or whatever, right? But if you're not in the club, you'd think they wouldn't want you writing about them. Do you know if he got any pushback like that
I have
in
no
his day?
idea. I have no idea. What I do know is that he was very well respected in his own day. Now, granted, he also wrote a number of novels that were very well received and things like that. So that might help. That might help.
Yeah. And then, of course, he alludes to Christ, too, or at least to one of Christ's sayings in the second last line, which is interesting, too.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I want to just walk right through it, man, and talk about some of these ideas. These are concepts that I think I need to think about more. And so if you're willing to dive into that with me, let's
do it. Line by line. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too.
So you go first.
We live in a world where you're supposed to believe in yourself no matter what, even if it's blind and foolish.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to do exactly the opposite. Like, you should be able to trust yourself when people doubt you, but recognize there's probably something of value. There's something real in that doubt. Like, why are they doubting you? That should be a question in the back of your head. There is no blind faith, grit your teeth and get through it. You're the best. You're perfect the way you are. You're enough. There's none of that. It's exactly the opposite. When men doubt you, know that there's a reason.
Yeah, it's kind of like the bad mumble rapper who asserts very blindly that he is the best rapper of all time, even though his music's trash. And he may have gotten a hit, right? He got one top 40 hit, and now he thinks, no matter what any of the critics say, right? It's just if you're a rapper, right, you don't believe any critics ever. And that's not what Kipling's doing. He's like, no, like, make allowance for their doubting. They probably have reason to think twice about you because you have reason, if you're honest, to think twice about you, even if you're competent, even if you excel at something, even if you've made the hard choice and it was the right choice. It's not like the people who disagree with you are thoughtless. Like they disagree with you for a reason. And there's probably something in there, right? That's true or laudable, if not true. Well, maybe both.
I certainly am guilty of this at times, so perhaps it's a sin I ought to confess to. But we have a tendency, a broad tendency, when people disagree with us or they don't see things our way, or even when they criticize us, what do we say? Well, he's an idiot. Oh, what a jerk. And you just completely dismiss offhand whatever has been said. I mean, this is what we see in media, too, consistently. That's what canceling is. You said something offensive. Now nothing you say gets to be considered.
Yeah, this is both on the left and on the right. We use words for this, right? So they're a climate denier or climate change denier. Just ends the conversation. They're a Nazi, right? Ends the conversation. They're they have the woke mind virus. They are crazy, right? Often, again, on the right, it's just they're crazy. They're demented, right? And all of those words just stop conversation and stop criticism. They don't actually allow the subject to play out and to listen to the other perspective's argument or something like that. Yeah, not at all. It's so easy to do as a human, I think.
Yeah, especially if it's something that you want or that you've worked for, to then hear someone criticize what you've done or what you're doing, it's very, very easy to just dismiss them.
Well, and I find if I'm proud of something, like I really think that what this thing I did was is a good thing, and I genuinely believe that this is well done or this is done honestly or sincerely, right? And then if someone criticizes that, what I've done in sincerity, how dare you criticize what I've done in sincerity? Sure, I'm not, not a great guy or not perfect, and so I do things not sincerely, but this thing was sincere, and so how, but that's First Corinthians where Paul says, I don't even judge myself. He knows his conscience, although it is clear, is not perfectly informed, and so he must allow Christ and Christ alone to judge him. And sometimes God uses someone else to show you what maybe you've done.
Yeah. And at the same time, we don't want to put too much stock in that either, right? My self-worth, my identity should not be determined by what other people think of me. And
Yeah,
yet, there is some credence.
yeah, and like the joy in self-forgetfulness is kind of the key. That's Tim Keller's idea, right? Like I'm not trying to do it to be good, and I'm not trying to do it to be selfish either. I'm just trying to do it for that person or for those people or for this society or this organization, right? And then it doesn't. If you get criticism, it doesn't stick around. Just off your back. But it allows you
Well,
to make a
even,
good decision next time.
right, that's where I was going to go too, is if I'm doing something for if I'm doing something for the sake of someone else, and I think I'm doing it really well, and then somebody points out a way to make it better, I don't go, shucks, like I quit, or shucks, I knew I wasn't any good. You go, oh, yes, I will do that, and that will make it better. Thank
Yeah,
you, and you keep
it
chugging.
makes it we're on the same side here. One of my church councilmen gave me some feedback on the service and how it could be, tweaked just a little bit to be better. And I, at that time, by God's grace, thought, oh yeah, like that would help. That would be better. That'd be more clear for all the visitors, right? And so there we go. Now we've got a bigger like introduction thing on the bulletin that explains where the bathrooms are. Excellent, good idea. Don't need to be offended over the fact that I didn't come up with that idea.
And yet, it's so easy to do.
I uh, I think I need a bumper sticker that says it's not about you, but I need it on my forehead too. Like
I love it. All right. He continues. Well, I skipped the first line. If you can, I'm not sure it needs much commentary, but if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, boy, oh boy, is it difficult to keep your head when you're being criticized, especially when you're the one who's taking the blame.
Yeah, that reminds me of a football game I was in. That's the first thing I thought of, where like I missed a tackle and the whole defense was doing poorly, and one of the linebackers gave me like a reaming out, like this is your fault, where you're failing us on the coverage here, and whether I wanted to go to whether or not he was right or wrong, right? Like, well, did you get your assignment right? Did you get past your block and all the rest? But what I needed to do was just keep my head and make the next tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. You also losing your head doesn't make anything better, even if you win the argument. In fact, perhaps the worst thing you can do in moments like that often is to win the argument. So instead of losing the argument, take a deep breath, swallow. You might need to like quell the disruption or whatever it might be. Like you might need to. I'm not saying just eat the criticism or eat the heat, but you also losing your head just means that now there's two people out of control instead of one.
Yeah.
There's two people that have entered the irrational realm instead of one. So instead of also entering the irrational realm, it should be your goal to bring them back into it so you can have a conversation about it.
Exactly.
All right.
Absolutely.
Now, Kipling continues by saying, you shouldn't look too good nor talk too wise. Why is it good counsel not to look too good or talk too wise?
Why is it good counsel to not look too good or talk too wise? Well, I think people who look too good attract other people who look too good. And there's probably something false in that eventually, right? If you're too polished, you're not as human as maybe you actually are. Or you're not. You're got a little facade up, maybe. Same thing with talking wise, right? Like it's good to be wise, but if your goal is to look wise, then you become foolish all over again.
It makes me think about this concept can be applied in both directions. It makes me think about the guy who talks about how good he is at something, or
Yes.
talks about how wise he is, or talks about how good looking he is, whatever, versus the guy who usually actually is wise and intelligent and good looking or whatever it might be. You don't have to tell me if that's true about you. I'm going to find out, and I'm going to find out quick. Like, if you are the smartest guy in the room, you're going to naturally prove yourself to be the smartest guy in the room probably pretty quickly. If you are the best looking or the best dressed guy on the street, people are going to notice you. You shouldn't have to stand up there in yellow pants and yell, hey, look how good I am. Look how good I look. Same thing on a basketball court. If you walk into the gym talking about how good you are, what's the point? Just go play basketball and people will know how good you are, how good you might be. I was thinking about this with, I played a round of golf last weekend. I'm going to spend about 4 hours at the range today, I think. But, well, maybe not 4 hours. Yeah, it might be 4 hours.
Was it the Sem Scramble?
Anyway, it was a scramble. It was the worst foursome I've ever played with in my life, including myself. Like, it was bad. It was bad. It was so. When you normal golf expectations are about here, and then you play worse and worse and worse and worse, and it just like things get harder and it gets worse, and you start getting miserable, and then there comes a point where you're playing so bad that everyone gives up, and then it starts to get more enjoyable again.
Yeah.
Because you've all given up and there's zero pressure and no expectations. It was that bad, and it. Yeah. Anyway, I kept thinking to myself, yeah, but if they saw me if I had been to the range, yeah, but if they saw me on a good, this is all just false premises. Who cares if you had been
You didn't
yes,
perform.
I usually play better than this. It does not matter because you're not playing better than this. As far as the scramble goes today, we're not using your ball.
Yeah.
That's truth. You can't change the truth by talking about what may have once been true, or the fact that you shot a 39 once, or whatever it might be.
It's like the guy on Facebook who has all the best ideas to fix the country or fix the state or fix the synod, layman, pastor, whatever, right? But they don't have any action or skin in the game. Like, okay, here's what I'm actually going to do, right? Like, I'm going to talk about my competency or how I should have this position. I should be a senator, but I'm not going to run for local change or whatever it is, right? I noticed this quality in not needing to look wise at pastors' conference in a really good way. The district president, he of course runs the discussion at district conference, kind of on everything. And so there was a question of casuistry, and that's like a hard question that pastors will throw out to each other to talk through and kind of get the whole group's perspective on. It's usually a hard matter. And we only had like two big ones we worked through for a while. But the district president, he as the respected, leader, he could have just said, "All right, here's the answer. Here's how it is. Here's how I think it should go." And then that could have been the end of it. But he didn't do that. He opened it up to the brothers, and he let them talk, and he let everyone with decent opinions talk, and everyone with great opinions talk, and the guys who maybe didn't quite know what to think talk, and he didn't stop anybody, right? He just let everyone say and contribute, and everyone, I think, probably had something valuable to say, and he didn't even have to have the last word, right? He just let the other men take care of it, and he didn't need to look wise one bit. And I thought that's good leadership. That's good wisdom. I mean, if he would have needed to put a lid on something or correct someone, he would have, but he didn't need to. So he let them do it, and they did. The brothers at conference took care of him.
Yeah. And you contrast that with I spend most of my time working on Facebook at the moment, interacting with members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I had a guy who was telling me, he was criticizing something that we posted, which was a direct quote from the LDS website. And he kept saying, "You're misrepresenting my beliefs." And even messaging me like, "You need to repent of misrepresenting our beliefs. What you're doing is vile," so forth, right?
Uh-huh.
And I sent him the
Screenshot.
citation and everything and a link to it. Here's where you can find it. And he just kept saying, "You're misrepresenting our beliefs." And I kept saying, "Then express to me what your beliefs are." And his response was, "I'm very good at expressing my beliefs, and you're not very good at understanding them." And I thought, that's the exact opposite of how teaching works.
Right.
You can say that you're good at explaining your side of things, but I don't understand, and it's in my best interest to understand here. And
Yeah.
yet, I'm working really hard to understand. I'm not understanding. And you're telling me, instead of trying to help me understand, you're telling me how good you are at helping me understand. Maybe don't tell me how good you are at it, and just show me how good you are at it.
Yeah, I'm ready to believe you. Just show me your receipts. Show me what's going on. Please help me out. And
Yep.
that's an invitation, right? And if you won't accept an invitation to dialogue, then you've kind of got a non-starter. Um,
And the interesting thing about that is I wasn't debating him on whether or not it's true. It's just, no, this is what you. I don't know what to tell you, man. The people running your church said that this is true, and I quoted them.
it's amazing what like preempting that will do. Like if you say, okay, so here's how I understand your position. Let me lay it out for you. I was talking with a Catholic woman the other day in a coffee shop, and just like, all right, so because she's asking me about like why you Protestant, and I said, well, and then I kind of laid it out, and then I kept trying to check with her like, is this what you were taught? Is this how you understand the Catholic faith? This is how I read it. This is how I've been taught what you guys do from your catechism. And it's amazing when you give a little bit of generosity to their perspective and a little bit of humility. Like, I'm willing to be corrected here. How quickly the conversation just opened up and she was willing to dialogue and it wasn't shut down. And it's so useful in not just in debates, but probably in every field, everything.
But it all starts with the humility to say, I don't know it all.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Kipling then continues, and he says, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you give your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. And he kind of goes through these if scenarios. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. So he's kind of got the two sides of the coin there. He's got you're a victim of other people or you're a victim of yourself. Either way, you just start building back, right? Whether you're watching other people tear down what you've built, or I like that he uses gambling here, but you make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and you have to start over from scratch. You've lost everything.
All gone.
Like you bet the farm and the farm is gone. Go buy a cow.
Yeah.
Go start working the soil. Don't talk about how much you've lost. Just go start over. Not that we shouldn't grieve our losses. We certainly should do that. But the point he's getting at is I'm not going to spend the rest of my life now talking about what I've lost. I'm going to start building again. It's the Job scenario, right?
Yeah, just, well, assert that God is good. Although, not that Job did that perfectly, but that's kind of the way you're supposed to grab it from the story at the end of it, right? Is you don't know why God did this. Everyone thought that was the question, is Job moral or not? And the real answer, which you know as the reader, is actually Satan's having a wager with God. That's the real reason, and that irony washes over the whole book.
And he's so good. He's so far beyond reproach that the devil himself said, come on, this guy can't be real.
Yeah.
And yet everybody in the whole story goes, come on, this guy can't be real.
It's like
every step of the way.
Habakkuk asks God, like, why are you going to let the Babylonians do this to us? And God's like, you wouldn't understand if I told you. Like, the answer's beyond you. Psalm 131, I don't concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. Like, the answer to the big questions is wonderful. It's too much. It's past what you can figure out. So build back up. Build back up.
And so understanding that, as Job says, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, let the name of the Lord be praised. The Lord is not absent when you put it all on black. The Lord is not absent when somebody else tears down what you've built. The Lord is present in that situation too. The Lord still is in command and control, and he has decided to allow this to happen. Whether or not you understand why, the Lord still is in control. Even in this, the word of the Lord is being done. The will of the Lord is being done, and the name of the Lord should be praised for it.
Well, you can imagine a situation where someone, maybe they went to Reno or to Vegas, and they had to go for other reasons, like a business trip. And then maybe they just walked a little too close to the casino, and they thought, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. But then they don't just give it a shot. They end up doing something foolish, right? And I can imagine a situation in which a guy bets, he sells his car or something wild, and God actually takes away the car then. Or God actually lets him win. And both of those could be experiences where God uses that to teach him a lesson. If you lose the car, the lesson's kind of obvious. Like, yeah, well, maybe don't be a moron. If God spares you, we've all had moments where God spares you from something, and you're like, oh man, there is a God. Like, let me remember that again. He's in charge here, and thank goodness, because I could have really been in trouble. So, tell me this: what's the biblical position on risk management? What's our theology of risk? Trying to figure that out, because he talks about risk a little bit. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, right, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss. Now that's gambling, I understand, but where's our position on risk? Is it in the Confessions? I'm trying to figure this out. I don't know.
I cannot speak authoritatively on whether or not it's in the Confessions. That I don't know. Maybe you do.
No, I don't. I wasn't priming you to make me look knowledgeable. You tell me how you don't know it's in the Confessions, and I'll tell you where it is. No, I don't know.
Jacob needs to not look too good or talk too wise.
Yeah, you've got risk a little bit when you've got casting lots, right? In Acts, I suppose. And then in Jonah.
And the question of stewardship also gets involved. But then stewardship is not a single principle that applies evenly
In a
to all
vacuum.
people. It's unique to your situation. And there is conceivably, I'm not sure I can think of one off the top of my head, there is conceivably a situation where good stewardship would involve great risk. On a smaller scale, you could talk about investments and things. It's not a sin to venture to be a venture capitalist. That wouldn't be a sinful way to make a living, and it's all about betting the odds. Right? It's all about taking risks with your money and being rewarded for it. Now, the more education you have and the more intuition you have about these things, the less risky it is, but it still continues to be risky. And if you're going to make it big or even survive, you're going to have to take some bigger risks. So it would be foolish and unwise, and I think unbiblical, to say that that is just blanket wrong because it is risk. Like it's
Well,
bad stewardship because it's a risk. Then you'd never invest in anything ever. You'd never invest in a business. You'd never invest in a car. You'd never invest in anything ever because you begin to hate that which is physical and real. On the
yeah,
opposite side of that, obviously, is the foolishness of, like, I'm destroying lives and my family and things like that because of the risks that I take.
yeah, like owning a car and driving it is taking on risk. You could get in a car accident, but that doesn't mean risk is evil. Like you must eliminate risk from your life because finally, like God's gonna take you home when He wants.
Well, our Christian lives are not about risk mitigation.
Bingo.
It's our Christian lives, to a great degree, are about embracing the risk and trusting the one who has created me, the one who holds all things in his hands, continues to create, continues to love me, and continues to bring me on a path towards his heavenly kingdom, where he is waiting for me with his arms open wide. So when you recognize that and remember that, all of a sudden risk changes, and it's not even about what's right or wrong most of the time. It's about what pleases my Father. Those two things are related, but they're not the same. And so as a single guy who's 28 years old and has discretionary income, and he goes to Vegas and he says, hey, if I win this, I get to live a little bit different lifestyle. And then also, I'm not saying in order to go to the casino and bet, you have to think, I'm going to give some of this money to the church. I'm not saying that at all. But because of the way he lives his life, this is a natural thing that's going to happen. Like he has a healthy view of money and wealth and so forth, and he goes out and he takes a little risk. Whether he wins or he loses, he praises the Lord. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of related to those two lines. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, and if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, you can have a plan, and it might be a godly plan, but you can't be enveloped, obsessed with the plan, right? God will provide the steps. That's actually kind of interesting. What do you think Kipling's thinking? So we think about God when we think, God's the master. He will provide our steps. But when Kipling writes, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, I don't know what he's aiming at.
If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. Oh man, how many times have you met a big thinker who just thinks or even talks for the sake of thinking or talking, and not in the service of anything? How many problems have we gotten ourselves into as humans because instead of science being the study of God's creation, it becomes a God to us, right? Thinking is the goal, not answers. You see this just on a small level. You see this in a crazy way when you start reading theological papers. How many papers have been written because somebody was trying to get a doctorate and not because somebody was trying to get an answer?
Yeah,
How
that's
many
like
different
the
theologies or philosophies or ideas have been created? What is the JEDP? The
yeah.
whole point was, I'm trying to make a name for myself, and here's a theory. And the people that launched the idea of the theory didn't necessarily subscribe to it. And yet you have 100+ years of people subscribing to it as if it is the gospel truth, even though the people that put it together were just putting out an idea that they didn't necessarily subscribe to, which is a fascinating thing too.
You've got the medieval theologian debate how many angels can dance on the pin of a head, or head of a pin, right? And you'd have these guys who write diatribes and tracts and maybe even books about the topic, or have a disputation, and where is that useful for the kingdom of God, right? Like there's probably a place for pious speculation. You can wonder about things like angels and heaven, but at some point, like, the people need to be preached to, and the diapers need to get changed. So, you know, yeah, get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love the poignant picture of worn out tools. Is somebody beginning a brand new project with worn out tools? Brand new project with worn out tools.
I think that almost fits. Like, you shouldn't get all the nice tools right away because you won't even appreciate them or be able to use them well, right? If you're a kid and you're going to build your first desk, like, you should probably use dad's old hammer and his old saw. And it's not going to be perfect, but neither is your desk, whether you've got the right tools or not. I don't know. Like, the learning
And
curve is good.
you cannot master a skill or a tool without practice. Mastery takes time and effort, and it takes intentional time and effort. So if you're going to master a tool, that tool's not going to be brand new anymore by the time you've mastered it. In fact, it's probably going to be worn out by the time you've mastered the tool. And to see a master craftsman using I I would assert that you will rarely find a master craftsman using an entirely new set of tools. I would be shocked to find out that that's ever true, because the master craftsman is going to keep going back to the same tools that he's used, that his fingers are used to, that he has trained himself in his craft using, because he's skillful with them. And instead of throwing up your hands in the air and saying, well, I guess we're going back to the drawing board and starting all over and we're going to try something else. Like, look, you've gained a wisdom and experience. You've gained skill. You've gained perspective. Now let's lean into that skill and perspective and experience, and let's build.
He's got grips that he's used to, right? And so if he gets a brand new whatever, it's going to feel different. He's actually going to maybe be worse than if he had the tools he's used to using. You can even feel that, I think, with a Bible. Like, if it's a Bible you've had a long time, you just kind of have the feel of where things are in it, and it's faster. I don't know. Maybe that's strange sounding, but
No, I'm with you. I wouldn't have thought of that one. I agree with you. I wouldn't have thought of that one myself. The one I was thinking of was golf clubs. Whether or not your golf clubs are even the right size for you, would you rather play with your clubs or with somebody else's?
right, mine for sure.
Every single time, even if they're the wrong size and they're not very good, I'd rather play with mine.
You know what this is? This is David and Goliath. He gets the armor from Saul, and he's like, I can't do this. This is not who I know how to fight, or not who I am, not how I fight. I fight with a sling. And so he's like, I'm not putting the armor on, Saul. And sure enough,
Yeah. That leads us also, we kind of buzzed past it, but he says if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. Are triumph and disaster both imposters?
Are they both imposters? I think in one sense they are, because well, see, this is part of what I meant before, is from a strictly human point of view, that's an interesting question I don't know how to answer. But from a Christian point of view, I would say they are, because whatever triumph or glory you experience here is not what the real glory that you want, that you will receive in heaven is. Like, it's a shadow, right? And if you got disaster here, likewise, it's not worth comparing to either the disaster that people face in perdition or the reward that God will give you in heaven. Like, both of them are distractions from the one thing needful. But I don't know if he's thinking that as he's writing.
I think from a strictly human perspective, it also is true simply because neither of them is permanent. There
Okay.
is no victory you win where you'll never have to fight again. There is no war to end all wars. And there's no defeat that means you'll always be defeated. There is no defeat so bad that you cannot return. It might feel that way, but precedent would say you can always come back.
When you always
And
fall from the
experience
top.
would say, experience would say you can never stay at the top forever either. I was thinking about the Caesars. Supposedly, when the Caesars would be riding back into Rome with their victorious party and the literal captives in their train, right? They would bring in the generals and kings from these other nations that they defeated, usually on chains, and they would follow along behind the victorious generals and conquerors, and they would have a slave standing behind them whispering in their ear, "Memento mori, remember you must die.
I was wondering
Remember
if
you
that's where
must
that was
die.
going.
Remember you must die." And so whether you stand at the top of the highest mountain in great victory and glory, and God alone has greater glory than you, remember you must die. This will all pass. You will grow old. Your strength will wane. This will all pass. Keep it in perspective. Or whether you are at the darkest valley, the deepest pit of despair and defeat, your heart's still beating. You're still alive. Well, there as a Christian, you might say, "Lord, just take me home." And that's an appropriate attitude. But as from an earthly perspective, your heart's still beating. You're still alive. There's still breath in your lungs. You're not done yet. The story isn't done being written. Keep moving forward.
That reminds me of two different things. Do you know the name of that football player? I think he was a lineman, and then he was in the NFL for 4 or 5 years, maybe it's only 3 years, just a few years. Was a good lineman, was not injured, and he just left to be a farmer and help people. I forget his name, but I think I watched a story on ESPN or something about this guy, and I think he'd successfully taken Triumph and set it on the shelf. Instead of falling from it, he's like, "Yeah, that was fun. Now we're gonna keep moving." That was the one thought. The other thought was, this pastor, I heard him say, "Don't take yourself too seriously because nothing's going to be more embarrassing than when you die." And I thought that was rather poignant. He's like, as cool as you might be, as beloved as you might think you are, as successful or as smart as you might, be when you're at the height of your career, just remember, you're gonna look really stupid in a box. And that was kind of harsh, but it was what I needed to hear. When I was listening to him, I was like, "Wow, that's really good." Because I am dust. I am but dust.
It's a good reason to. A good reason to make your bed and keep your room clean too, because you don't know what day it's going to be when somebody has to come clean out your stuff.
I like that. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah. What are you leaving behind? What kind of trash you got in your house that people don't want to have to throw away?
Are they
I'll,
gonna have to
I'll-
do my laundry? Like, are they gonna take care of my stinky garbage? Let's
yeah,
just make sure. If today's the day, if today's the day, and I don't make it home, I'm gonna make sure that you know are my finances in order? Are my the big things? Are my finances in order? Can you figure out how to get into my computers and take all care of all that stuff? Right. That's a big part of it. But the little stuff too. Um, what? Well, and then you can take that in the emotional realm. What was the last thing I said to my mother?
mm,
What? How did I leave things with my friends? It's a good reason every day to just keep saying, I'll make sure I leave things the right way, do things right today. I'll make sure I'm
yeah,
a blessing today, because it might be my last day. And I'll be rejoicing in heaven. I don't want to leave a mess behind me here.
yeah. Or it's the last day, right? And it's just there we go. You know,
Yeah,
it's easy to forget either of
absolutely.
those things, especially as a young guy.
Oh, yeah. When you don't have perspective on what true triumph and disaster are, everything feels like a triumph or disaster. That's why 3-year-olds throw a temper tantrum or just are blissfully happy. Why are little kids laughing at funerals and why are little kids crying in the toy aisle at the grocery store? It's because everything's a triumph and everything's a disaster all the time.
Or why does an eighth grade girl cry after every basketball game, whether they win or lose, right? You know,
Hmm.
she's figuring it out emotionally what it's like to experience gain or loss, and that's
Amen.
good, right? It's good to do that in a sport before you uh, do it in the stock exchange.
Oh, a great case for youth sports, for sure. All right, we got to keep cruising here.
Yeah.
If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. I heard somebody say once, we do hard things so that hard things get easier to do. But we also live in a culture where we don't always do hard things. We kind of lean away from hard things. Not all the time, but that tends to be our, I'm being redundant, tends to be our tendency, right? What is
This is
the
my favorite.
value
Go
of
ahead.
doing hard things? Go ahead. What do you
Yeah.
think the value of doing hard things is?
When you willingly do hard things, then you're not so destroyed when you have to do harder things, right? I was thinking about this in terms of children. So when you got like a bunch of siblings and you've got to help out at home, then you're less selfish as a kid because like someone needs to help. Like a mom can't do it because there's 5 of you, or maybe there's 2 of you, whatever, right? And then you're just kind of trained like, oh, okay, I know how to like live with other people and I know how to contribute from a young age. But if you get this easier childhood where you don't have to do anything around the house, right? And all of a sudden you live on your own and you're like, man, not only do I not have the skills, but I just don't have the patience to do all this stuff. And it's really easy to be selfish when you live by yourself or when it's just you and you can take all of the time you need to do whatever. Yeah, like do hard things so that when responsibility makes you, you aren't crushed. That's yeah.
Is there more or less value, do you think, in hard physical things?
More or less than what?
So it
Like,
is possible to, like, this is a trite example. It takes hard work, long hours, and effort to complete every single level and every map on Legends of Zelda.
okay.
Is that
You don't know
a
that. You didn't do
greater...
that.
I have never done that,
I'm just
but I know
teasing.
a man who did. And I still hear Legends of Zelda in my sleep. The theme music from Legends of Zelda in my sleep. Because he beat, when the last one came out, and it was in college. The last one came out in probably, I don't know if it's the last one. There was one that came out in probably 2011 or 2012, something like that, based on who I was rooming with. And he decided he was going to beat it as fast as possible. He was going to try and be one of the first people in the world to not only beat the game, but then complete every pathway along
Sure.
the way, too.
Yeah.
And he played it for 24 hours a day, just straight, didn't sleep, nothing, until he defeated it. And like he was peeing in water bottles. There were people bringing food to our room and cheering him on. And I slept for 4 or 5 days with that playing in the background all night long.
Wow.
And he didn't shower, he didn't nothing. There was literally the chair he was sitting in was kind of offset to the TV. The chair started leaning towards the TV and never stood up straight again. Like, that's how
Wow.
intense this gaming session was. Now,
Dedicated.
here's the question. Is that of greater, lesser, or equal value to something like joining a CrossFit gym and competing in the CrossFit Open, or training to do a 12-mile hike in the mountains, or joining a rec league basketball club so that you lose weight, those types of things? Are those of the same value? What's the difference between them? What do you think?
That's a good question. Can I flip it around? Is
Go ahead.
training for a 16-mile summit of a mountain of greater or lesser value than training your mind to, I don't know, learn French, like be fluent in a second language, or to read all of, the works of Milton or something, some kind of hard intellectual task, right? So are those of equal value? Are those the same thing? Is the first thing I thought.
They are not the same thing, but the self-discipline, the mechanics of them are virtually, I don't want to say virtually the same. They are very similar. They run in similar strains. So if you can press yourself to run 12 miles a day. You can probably also press yourself to eat a decent diet, and you can probably also press yourself to read some good books. If you can discipline yourself and read through the Confessions 3 times a year,
Whoa.
you can probably also, well, it depends on which edition,
The
but
reader's
to work
edition
through
is
that,
like
right?
35 hours or 33 hours on Audible.
Yeah, it's thicker than my Bible is. If you're gonna do that 2-3 times a year, if you can discipline yourself to say, I'm gonna spend 35 minutes a day doing this. If you're gonna do that, and that's just an example, but if you're gonna do that 2 or 3 times a year, you're also gonna have the discipline that it takes to get out of bed in the morning and go work out.
Mm-hmm.
Likely. Now, it's not true of everybody, but that's because there's a value change too. Right? Not everybody shares the same values, and so they're not going to be pressing towards the same things. But it's the same mechanism of self-discipline in your mind that helps you do both things, even if they're
So
different skills.
here's why video games are different, I think, and probably worse. Because video games capitalize on your reward system from the light, the literally the lights flashing, and the like pace of it is unnatural, right? So like people who play like counter games or games where you want to gain more and more stuff, or even like life games like Sims or what's the cute Animal Crossing, the cute game that people like to play. It's a game in which the rewards of building your life, building your homestead, building your city, building your roller coaster park is faster than real life. And the whole time you're also kind of being fed a dopamine drip of blue light and big sound and stunning graphics and who knows what. And it's easier probably to adapt to. Now, there's probably some strain in your roommate. He had to push through fatigue and pain to do that, and that's an accomplishment. And I think I probably recognize that. It's like that's impressive. Guys who do speed running of video games, where they play the same game over and over again to do it as quickly as possible. I watched a documentary of the history of the speed running of Super Mario 64 blindfolded, which is a crazy idea. But these guys were competing to see who could beat the game fastest without looking at the screen, like literally blindfolded. That's impressive and takes discipline. Now, there like the other value or benefit, like kind of tangential to that, is maybe less, right? So if you learn French and you get the discipline from and you get a better mind because you've gone through the hard thing, well, now you actually have this great tool. Oh, I know French now. I can use that for business. I can use that to make new friends. I can use that to read French cuisine, you know, or I climbed a mountain, right? And now I'm actually stronger and I've got more endurance and I've gained some muscle mass. And so I'm going to be healthier for longer, right? The benefits in that regard of being able to speed run Mario 64 blindfolded, I think they're probably less. I'm sure like there's some focus that you gain from that, right? But I don't know what else.
And I think the thing that drives that difference is purpose. What's the good that's being done by this? What good is being done in my soul? What good is being done in the world for this purpose? If Jesus broke down the 10 commandments to 2. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Whatever I do should be throwing fuel on those 2 fires. And they're not exclusive. They're not, you do one thing one time and you do one thing that, like, you're not parsing your life and saying, well, right now I'm loving neighbor, and later I'm going to go do some God loving. I'm going to do some neighbor loving again, and flip the switch back and forth. And every once in a while I accidentally switch the flip to me loving, and that's completely separate from the other kinds of loving. It's just not the way it works. When I am animated and compelled by my love for the Savior, everything I do is sin still is sin. So
Yeah.
when I say this, I'm not saying this isn't triumphalism. Like I figured it out. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm speaking within the frame of original sin, right? And sinful human beings who are in love with their heavenly Father. What I do then with my life reflects both my love for God and the value I see in other people, because I recognize that they also are redeemed children of God, bought by the blood of the Lamb, just like me, which makes their value equal to mine, no matter who they might be. That makes me not a respecter of persons either in that regard, to a certain extent.
So
To a
here's,
certain extent.
I like that framework. And then here's the, like when I think in that way, it makes me ask this question: what's the place for recreation and entertainment then? Right? Like maybe you can like fill yourself up, you can relax, and then that allows you to serve. You hear that line a lot. Well, I need to relax so I can serve better. Sometimes I think that gets overplayed. Too. That's probably a different discussion. Here's my case, if there's any case, for why a video game might be valuable. I'm willing, like someone in the comments wants to tell me this is wrong, please do, because this is a working idea, not a thing I'm set on. I think that some games can be useful as like a coming of age experience or tool. So kind of like, the first time you go camping alone or camping without mom as a boy, that you do some things that are new, you know, that are scary, that are kind of put you on the edge of your limit. And I think there are themes and story written into certain types of video games where as a boy you can kind of see, okay, this is pushing me to face fears emotionally. Like it allows, I think, boys to kind of process some things through the story, and by playing through the story arc of a hero, almost like reading a fiction book, actually, or just like that, where you actually take some of the character and some of the hero with you, and his trial and his success and his failure becomes yours, and it gives you a frame for processing what you might go through in real life, and that needs to be tempered. You can get addicted to fiction books or video games, but that's kind of my thinking currently on what's the place. Is it does maybe provide a framework for you to think through, like the hero's journey, or the coming of age. What do you think? You're a pretty not video game guy, so your feedback on this would be good.
No. Part of the reason why I'm not a video game guy is that I know myself. So I wasn't raised with, we didn't have, like, we were not told you can't have video games. In fact, we would even rent, when the PS2 came out, we would rent the PS1 from Family Video because it was cheap, and we would play video games on it.
Yeah.
Same thing when the 360 came out, we would rent the old Xbox and play the old video games on it, and I'd play them at friends' houses and things. Like, we were not anti-video game, but my parents said, we're not going to buy them for you. This is something you need to invest in, which then made me make a value judgment.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to? I've got my money. What do I want to spend my money on? And ultimately, I never chose video games. Now, if I was wired a little differently, I might have chosen video games, and that wouldn't have been wrong. What I have been deciding, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, saying I was a wiser 12-year-old than anybody else. I'm just saying what I have consistently decided from the time I was a kid was I would rather have real experiences than experiences online. And that has guided my understanding of social media. Not to say that I've never gone down a black hole. That's a real problem for me. That is a real problem for me. I've got YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff blocked on my phone. Not on
Me
my
too.
computers,
Yeah,
but
me too.
blocked on my phone. Simply not because I've really, not even because generally it leads me into temptation. Because frankly, it doesn't. Sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't. The issue, as far as sexual things, right? It's not like if I open up Facebook, suddenly I'm going to go down the porn hole. Like that just isn't the way it works, at least for me. I know it is for some people. But that's not the way it works for me. The reason I don't want to do it is because it's a tremendous waste of my time. And I end up vicariously doing these things instead of doing them myself. And so instead of watching tons and tons of videos of other people living this wonderful life that probably isn't even real, why don't I go outside and put up a hammock in a tree and enjoy it for myself? Why do I need to see somebody else doing it? those kinds of things. That's the way I've thought about it for forever. So then my social media use is always purpose-driven. I shouldn't say always. Generally purpose-driven.
Supposed to be.
If I'm watching videos on YouTube, it's because I'm curious about something. I'm learning something. I'm studying something. And it's not usually for entertainment. Now, there are days where it is entertainment, and those days I tend to get sucked down into, and I'll lose like 3 hours out of my day, which is why I just chosen to avoid that. And I can see myself having the same problem with video games, which is also why I haven't gone into that as an adult. I will push back, though, on something you said earlier.
Please do, yeah.
You said you think that the idea of I need to rest so I can serve better gets overplayed. I will challenge that by saying, as a guy who's generally pretty introverted, I do genuinely need rest so I can serve. You do not want me, let me rephrase that. You would rather have me well rested than not, by a long shot. And when I say well rested, I mean like socially well rested. But I can still perform, I can still do what I need to do. I can still show up and have meaningful conversations and so forth. But I'm going to be a lot more effective in my various roles, and I'm going to enjoy this, and you're probably going to enjoy this a lot more if I can do it well-rested socially instead of coming out of, I just get worn out by people. Just frankly, that's the thing, right? Okay. So my pushback to you is not that you're wrong. I think your terms are a little off. I think meaningful rest or real rest is what needs to get inserted there instead of what we often call rest. Watching TV is not rest. Sitting here chilling on my phone is not rest. Playing video games is not rest. What I need is to go for a walk without any headphones. What I need is to leave my phone in my dorm room and go sit in a hammock for a while. What I need is to say to, this is projecting obviously, to say to my wife and my kids, I'm going to go spend a half an hour in the basement by myself, and I will be far more present with you then for the next hour and a half before bedtime, because I took a few minutes after work to just take a breath, compartmentalize those things, and get emotionally and mentally and even spiritually prepared to then show up meaningfully for you. Would you rather have me physically present but emotionally absent for 4 hours, or be physically and emotionally present for 3.5?
Yeah, and I agree with
the
that.
wise choice
for sure.
would be, yeah.
That's kind of where I was going, is that like just rest gets turned into more entertainment that's actually tiresome and not actual rest. That's the problem.
So let's call those entertainment things what they are, and call them entertainment and recreation and not rest.
Yeah.
And they can be restful at times, but that doesn't make them rest.
Right? Yeah, after church I'm pretty crabby, and it's better if I just sleep for an hour or 45 minutes or more and then get back to people than if I have to stay up and grind through the rest of the afternoon. It's going to be harder. It's going to be less pleasant, and not just for me, for anyone else probably. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. All right. I had another question I wanted to ask. Oh, here we go. These are my thoughts on physical labor. This is what I jotted down. I'm curious what your reaction is.
All right.
The value of physical labor is twofold. It's a reminder of both the futility and resilience. The frailty and resilience of the human body. And in a virtual world, it is important to stay grounded in both reality and mortality, which are lost entirely in the virtual world. So even when we do experience mortality in the virtual world, you can rewind and they come back to life again. Or, Iron Man snaps his fingers and you come back to life again, and we could just keep living in the same universe that we did before. And we say, oh, he lapsed. No, he died. In the real world, he doesn't come back again. Mm-hmm. Right? I can start the movie again and enjoy him again. In real life, he's dead. He's gone. The dog's gone. You're never going to see the dog again. You have to get a new dog or live without a dog. You don't get to rewind and watch it again. Same thing with like YouTube and things. You can watch somebody skateboard and fall off their skateboard and break a leg or bust their balls on the railing or whatever it might be and giggle at it, and then you swipe and off you go. You don't have to deal with the reality of, like, now your friend spends 6 months in rehab and there's consequences for you and for him of what just happened on the screen. You get
Yeah.
to just skip all of that and giggle and move on. Right? I think it's a valuable thing for us to be forced to stay rooted in what is real, because what is real is ultimately something physical, and what happens when we get unplugged.
I was listening to a pastor talk on a podcast about how he meditates on his mortality while he works out. And this has been very spiritually useful for him. So there's kind of two sides to it. One, you can despise and reject the flesh and hate the results of sin and Satan and his ways, and even despise that part of you. And at the same time, then he stops holding on to him and all the false idols that come with that, and then he's able to kind of rest again in the one hope that there is, right, the resurrection. And he's like, I think he's probably at low 40s, early or late 30s, early 40s. So he's just starting to feel older, and he's like, this has been good for me to help me age and accept this next stage of my life in a kind of a God-pleasing way, not denying anything, not feeling anxious about anything, but embracing what I have in Jesus and accepting the consequences of sin, the wages, if you will. And I thought that was useful, and that sounds just to be in line with what you said.
Yeah. What he's found is his own version of the slave that whispers in his ear, "Memento mori, remember you must die."
Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Kipling continues by kind of restating some things he said before. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, the earth is yours and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. I'm going to let Jacob talk about the second to last line in just a second. First, I'll say, and I'll ask you this question. This kind of sounds like a stoic and cold existence, doesn't it? You talk with crowds, and yet you can't keep your virtue. You walk with kings, but you still a common man. Your friends don't love on you too. Don't let your friends love on you too much. Don't let your enemies hate on you too much. All men should count with you, but no man should count with you too much. I'm nobody's hero, but I do have people that look up to me, people that I lead. Is this, like, I understand the avoidance of the extremes, but the more the more you dwell on it and think about it, that road gets, the berms on either side of the road close in, and that path gets narrower and narrower.
I would say that when all you have to stand on is virtue, even if you really are virtuous, like you really are someone who works for every 60 seconds of the unforgiving minute, and who does all these things, well, even at your best, you're a Pharisee. Like, it's not actually a good way to live. Not temporally, nor, well, there are some temporal advantages to virtue, of course. But eternally, this doesn't quite work. And temporally, I think it's very isolating. You might be more moral than everyone else, but what does that get you in the end? Because often the people who win in business or government aren't the most moral anyways, right? Like, it's not like you haven't figured out life in the universe by being stoic, by being a stoic philosopher. You've just chosen to not pick worse paths. Maybe that's not charitable enough to our stoic listeners, but
I think we're way too charitable to stoicism, personally.
Tell me more.
When you read the real, not like the modern Stoic and those things, they glorify what the Stoics believe. What the Stoics really believed is that everything is fruitless and futile, and so I serve myself alone. That's really what Stoicism is.
Yeah, like, I mean, Marcus Aurelius is a good example, I think, of this, like the paragon of virtue is kind of how he's presented. But like when his wife had an affair with a gladiator, he made her bathe in his blood. Like he killed a lot of Christians.
And you can justify that by saying, well, she's never going to cheat on me again. Well, frankly, that probably isn't true. But second, it's going to be hard to say, I'm going to give my heart entirely to this man. I'm just going to be better at hiding it, frankly. Anyway, we look at that self-preservation as a good thing. I'm not convinced that it is. And I'm certainly not convinced that it's a better option than forgiving.
What's building our house on sand, right? Like, are you really going to be, if you're going to stand on your virtue, you always have to stand on your virtue. Always, right? And that's not possible.
It's no other than just another way to mask your self-righteousness, your works righteousness, is I can transcend this world by mastering myself and my environment. And so instead of being caught up in the things of this world, I will master myself and transcend it. All you've done is save yourself, but save yourself from what?
And for
save
how
yourself
long?
From
That's
what I'm saying is you've saved yourself from the guilt of sin so that you might not need a savior. Ultimately, all you've done is save yourself from seeing the grace that you've been given.
Yeah, and even if you've saved yourself and you've preserved your health and your mind and you can master it, as best you can, and you really are the best at this. Well, maybe you're the best till you're 50 or till you're 70, but then you get dementia, man, and the wages of sin is death is still true. That's kind of harsh, but it's a harsh reality, and like Christ is the only option.
Yeah.
You can't cheat death. And I think that's the story of the Grim Reaper, right? You can't, like, you can't cheat him. He will get you. And men tried. I think about Brian Johnson. I think that's his name. He's this billionaire biohacker who thinks he's going to live forever, and he's a physical stoic. He practices perfect health virtue in every way, and he's excellent at it, right? And he looks very young for being as old as he is. Well, he's going to die, and all he's going to do is build an idol of sand, right? That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
False God, they can't speak to him.
Oh, he's made himself God.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's elevated himself to the status of a god. Now, you mentioned that Kipling alludes to some scripture here at the end. What are you talking about?
Yours is the earth and everything in it. Yeah. Well, it shows you that he's kind of probably familiar with the scriptures, and he's done the moralizing of them, but he hasn't, well, understood the gospel. I'm assuming that's it. Maybe that's. I don't know anything about Kipling's faith life actually, so maybe I should be careful before I say that. But that's what
No,
it sounds like to me.
you're pretty. My understanding, I'm not an expert either. My understanding is that you're pretty close on that. He is the enlightened Christian, the enlightened nominal Anglican Christian of the 19th century.
This is Jordan Peterson. This is
Yes.
do what Christ says to live a moral life, and you will have a better moral life, and you will get to feel happier about your virtue than the heathens, the hedonistic people who don't do what Christ says, because the world's more in order than it could have been if you didn't do that. And that's, you can almost hear Peterson say, and that's what it means to have everything in the world and to, well, no. It's not what it means.
You're missing something. You're missing the thing, which is why I love. So I love the poem. I love Rudyard Kipling's If. We're being critical of it, but we're not being entirely critical of it because it has tons of value. And yet there is something big missing, and so that's why I'm excited that you sent me this poem that Pullman wrote, because he hits the nail on the head. Here's what he said. The poem If by Rudyard Kipling gave all of us a certain plan, and if you follow that prescription, you may indeed become a man. I have admired and contemplated the things he said a man must do, but I still feel that something's missing, that he left out a vital clue. For somehow, Kipling failed to mention to be a man requires love, regardless of all good intention. That edict came from up above. For Christ himself gave us the message what we must do if we would gain prestige, greatness, and recognition in order to be whole again. He told us that we must be humble and that we must sacrifice our all, once more to gain that fleeting status we lost when Adam chose to fall. We must believe in life eternal, the gift of our omniscient God, no matter what the path we've chosen or the roads we have to trod, or the roads that we have trod. For only faith at last will bring us to where we reach that final goal, which brings salvation to all mankind and ultimately saves our soul. Like the biggest thing he puts his finger on is that the pinnacle, the ideal of manhood and masculinity, if you will, or the same thing with womanhood, is that we be restored to this condition in which we were created. So with that as his premise, he works backwards then. Well, how do I get there? And he walks through the commands that God has given, right? You must love. You must be humble. You must sacrifice all of yourself. You must, let's see here. You must become whole again. And the obvious pushback to that is, who then can be such a man? And there is just one.
I think the line that was most impactful to me was that once more to gain that fleeting status we lost when Adam chose to fall. So if you imagine for a moment that there is a man who's so virtuous and so giving of self that he actually manages to like restore himself to zero, like he's back to where he was, but his nature is still corrupt and he's going to drift back away. Now that's not possible. We can't actually atone for our sin kind of at all. But people think that way. And even if you could, you can't get rid of original sin. That the instinct to greed, the instinct to lust, the instinct to power is always within. And you can't rid yourself of it. Even if outwardly you manage to do so, you're still going to feel it. It's still going to pop up. It's insufferable. And only solved by one thing, by the gift.
So he says to be a man requires love, regardless of all good intention, and that edict comes from above. Where do you see that lacking in Kipling's caricature of manhood?
I think that duty and honor are more important than love in his framework. And duty and honor are good things, but love is the greatest, right? The first and greatest commandment and the second like it are both rooted in love. Then there's always the First Corinthians bit, right? If you have wisdom and all these things but have not love, then you are a resounding gong. And I think that's it. Like the highest virtue is love. And Kipling doesn't have that as his center. And probably even more than that, it's self-sacrificing, self-effacing, agape love, rooted in thankfulness for what God's done for you, right? Like it's all flipped on its head. It's not how man usually thinks about love. And I think that's probably how I'd put how he falls short. Does that ring for you, or are you going somewhere else with it?
That does ring for me. And I think, for me, I see it in his commentary about your interactions with other people, right? If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, what you've done essentially is separate yourself from humanity. You've made yourself something separate. Because if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, then you're not loving very hard. Like, there's not a lot being exchanged. There's something that isn't being exchanged between friends and enemies because you are aloof from them. You're not willing to be human with other people because ultimately what you're trying to do is overcome your humanity. Maybe our existence isn't about overcoming our humanity. Maybe our existence is about being human and allowing someone to rescue us from it.
Yeah, so if your toddler comes running to you, Daddy, right, just in full unbridled joy and jumps into your arms, and you say to yourself, I'm not going to be too emotionally connected at this moment. I'm going to, say I don't want to get sucked into the emotions of being human, so I don't feel my downfall when it comes, right? Well, that's awfully stoic and awfully stupid if you're a father.
Couldn't say it better. Couldn't say it better. I honestly have nothing to add to that. It's really well said.
But you just put
Um,
you just connected the dots for me, and then
yeah,
that's just what I just tried to say. What you said with an example, you're not loving enough. Yeah.
yeah. And why is it so bad to love? I mean, love is vulnerability. Love is vulnerability. Um, let me, I
Love
shouldn't say
is
that.
vulnerability.
No,
Unpack that.
if you are a loving person, you're going to, in order to love and be loved, you must be vulnerable. That's a better way to say it. In order to be loved, love and be loved, you must be vulnerable. And vulnerability makes you vulnerable, right? But that goes into our conversation about risk too. I mean, if there's no great risk, there's no great reward either. If you want to be loved, you also must make yourself that. You must allow yourself to be that which can be loved. And that requires that you be vulnerable, and that might mean that you get hurt. You can't insulate and protect yourself from everything all the time.
Yeah, I forget what book. This isn't a children's book I read as a boy, and I don't think I had remembered it for 15 years until you just said that. But there was a little boy in school, not maybe third grade, I don't know, and he had like peed his pants. And he already was like a not very confident kid. And all the kids were bullying him. And so one boy who had more status and more confidence, he gets up and he just like pees his pants on purpose. And he does it just to take the heat off the kid. And I think that's also vulnerability. Like he was willing to receive shame and embarrassment for the sake of the other. And that's not stoicism at all. That is love though.
Yeah,
Strange example.
absolutely.
Sorry for that, but
No, it's really good though. It's really good because you have not only is he opening himself up to the ridicule and so forth, but he also has opened himself up to feel compassion and empathy for the other kid.
yeah, and this is the thing with a father too. You do the dirty job, you change the diaper, right? Like this is you expose yourself to gross things because it's not about how you feel, it's about the needs of the child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Pullman finishes off his poem by saying, which brings salvation to all mankind and ultimately saves our soul. Recognizing that faith alone will bring us to the goal, and he's right about that, where does effort come in?
Well, so
Um,
can I talk about Riney for a bit? Riney Pullman,
yeah,
that's his name. So because this will be relevant to what you just asked, where does effort come in? And faith at last will bring us to our goal. So he had, I'm gonna get this wrong, but he had several, I'll just say respiratory issues and diseases, if you will, that just were debilitating, and he was very sick for like 15 plus years actually. He was bedridden, he was blind the last few years of his life. The man went through a tremendous amount of suffering. He just hurt all the time. He would sit up to receive communion out of respect, which is amazing. And I could see it hurt, but he would do it because he wanted communion and he loved a savior. And it was like very virtuous. You could tell he thought about some of the things Kipling said. But at the end of it all, even though he had really kept his nerve in an incredible way through all the suffering, like he in his last weeks was exasperated and hurt, and it was hard to stay calm, cool, and collected. The guy was really really in a bad way. And but what calmed him down? What gave him peace at the end of his life? Psalm 23, the Lord's Prayer, reading the familiar parts of the Bible to him that he knew, John 14, you know, um, Psalm 23 actually was probably the best for this. We'd read that again, and he'd say it with me, word for word, just on command. It was there, man. And all of the virtue that he had got to go to the side. All of the strength that he was losing because he was sick and he was going to his Father in heaven got to be set aside. And instead, his faith shone brightly, and he got to trust. And he did trust, and God took him home. And he lived out his last stanza here. For only faith at last will bring us to where we reach that final goal. Like, he proved what he wrote is true in his last days. And God be praised for that, for preserving his faith.
Awesome. Love it. Jacob, it's always a joy to chat with you, man. I miss you, brother. Glad to see you for a little while here and talk about these things. Love these conversations, too. I'm very, very glad that we had it. So,
yeah, it's great to talk to you. Glad to talk a bit before all the big stuff happens in your life. And it's fun to talk. This has been fruitful for me. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about
absolutely.
And Mr. Pullman's commentary. This is great.
Yeah. And thank you to the Pullman family for sharing it with us, also letting us use it. It's awesome. It's cool, and definitely fodder for good thoughts and conversation. If you enjoy the kinds of conversations that we've had today, go ahead and please consider supporting the work that we do here at Gird Up. You can do so using the links down in the show notes below. God bless you all. Thank you again to Jacob, and everybody have a wonderful week.